This is Annie Grace, and you are listening to This Naked Mind podcast, where without judgment, pain, or rules, we explore the role of alcohol in our lives and culture. Today, we are diving into people's stories, which I think is one of the most powerful things, is just hearing from other individuals. You know, we can hear from experts all day long, but actually just hearing from people who have been there, done that is just so amazing. There's something really special about it. And today I have a special woman with me. Her name is Maureen. Hi, Maureen. Welcome.
Hi, Annie. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here. This is really exciting. These are my by far and away favorites. I mean, it's great to get to talk to other authors and whatnot, but getting to talk to just have good conversations with real people is my favorite thing to do. So anyway, we're going to start kind of way back when, if you don't mind. So why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and talk about who Maureen was, sort of before you even started questioning your drinking. Where were you at in your life, and what was even your first few drinks like?
Well, my first few drinks were horrible. I was 18, and my friends and I got hold of a bottle of rye whiskey from one of our parents' liquor cabinets, and it was not a pleasant experience. And I really didn't drink again until I started working in the restaurant industry, where it was just so much a part of the culture that at about age 24, 25, I started drinking on a really regular basis, and went off and on. I had 3 kids. I stopped drinking when I was pregnant and breastfeeding, but then it would start to creep up again until it became something that I was just doing every day, and tried to cut back, and sometimes successfully for a while, but it always crept back in. So when I made the decision to actually quit for good, after reading your book, Annie, it was easy. It was easy to do. The hard part was the decision, but once that was made, it was really quite effortless. And I'm just so happy that I made this decision, and life looks so different now.
Oh, that's so awesome. So let's talk about some of the, initial, I talk a lot about the cognitive dissonance, the thing that happens where there's this one point in time where you're just kind of like going on drinking and you're not giving much thought to it because it's just kind of part of life. And the interesting thing is how little kind of mental space drinking takes up. For me, it was kind of a significant amount of time. I mean, drinking was not a big deal in my life for many years. And then something changed where it became a bigger deal. And I think that often that's triggered by when we start to drink to relieve stress. If you're just drinking purely socially, alcohol actually has a slightly different effect on you than if you're drinking to relieve stress, because alcohol is an anesthetic. And so it makes you not feel the stress. So it feels a lot better when you're drinking to relieve stress. Alcohol can really numb that. And then all of a sudden, drinking becomes something that is taking up a lot more of your mental thoughts. And then something happens where you start to say, oh, wait a second, I'm not happy with this. And so what was that like for you? Like where were you when you kind of things changed?
I think it was when my dad died, which was 11 years ago, and it hit me really hard. And I was in very intense grief for the weeks following. And I was drinking every day, and I felt quite justified in doing it. I was going through an extremely rough patch, and it was at that time, after weeks and weeks of drinking every single day, and probably close to a bottle of wine every day, or, the better part of a bottle of wine every day, that I realized, wow, I've become very dependent. And there were other times too, like going on vacation or holidays with family and friends, or even going away for a weekend. And at the end of it thinking, wow, I have to get home and dry out. I have to get home and recover. And it occurred to me that, wow, what a stupid way to spend these times that are supposed to be relaxing and fun and wonderful, and feeling hungover for a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, your dad dying, like so many, it does feel like for often with drinking, it's very much a cycle that is more over time. But there isn't a lot
Yep.
to get us drinking every single day, socially. Like, we're really not
Yeah.
going out every single day, right? And the two things you hit on, some instance of tragedy or high stress where we start to drink to do that, or some instance of kind of vacation, holiday, where for some bizarre reason we've made it like this expectation that, all
Yeah.
inclusive holiday, we're going to go get tanked every day
Yay.
of the
Yep.
week. Um, so it's just a very, very common thing, especially the trauma. And almost every person I talked to had that moment of, whether it was divorce or something happening with their children or a death in their family, or even, people who started drinking at a very young age, some childhood trauma. And then you have that drink and it relieves stress in a way that, a lot of people's first drink, it was just really no big deal and it wasn't great. And that's because there was nothing to numb. There was nothing to
Mm-hmm.
numb. So
Mm-hmm.
you didn't feel significantly better. So it became something. It's very interesting, though, and I want to hear more, but I want to make this one little point because you talked about the vacation, right? So even if
Mm-hmm.
you're drinking just socially for years and years and years, if you overdo it one night, your natural instinct is then to stop the next day and probably stop for a week or two. So you always hear that, oh man, I really went out on that
Mm-hmm.
Saturday night, I went to that wedding, and then the person in question knows it made them feel so horrible that they stop drinking for a few weeks and then they start off really slowly again because they're like, oh gosh, that was
Yep.
miserable, right? But
Yep.
then you're on vacation and it's expected that you drink the next day. And even though it's kind of repulsive to your body, even though you're like, oh, disgusting, you do it anyway. And guess
You get
what?
over it.
You get over it. And amazingly, similar to how alcohol numbs the stress and anxiety and makes you like, wow, your brain learns this makes me feel better. Your brain learns that this is the antidote to stress. But then as soon as that drink leaves your system, it brings you back down below par. Alcohol numbs the feelings of alcohol. So your body and brain are under serious amounts of physical and mental stress when you're hungover. And so when you don't drink when you're hungover, you don't teach yourself that lesson. But then when you're on
Mm-hmm.
vacation and you do drink when you're hungover, you teach yourself subconsciously this lesson that, there's a cure for this horrible feeling. And that
Yep.
cure is alcohol. And so you end up doing the thing, hair of the dog, doing the thing that ended up making you feel bad. And then that's where the problems start, is because you are drinking to numb the feeling of the hangover. And then it becomes harder and harder and harder to get out of that as much. And it's funny because people who binge drink or drink lots on one occasion and then feel horrible and then say, oh, I'm done. I'm not doing that for a long time. They think, okay, well, I don't have a problem because I can really stop for many periods of time, right? So it really
Exactly.
prevents
Yeah.
us from thinking we have a problem. Equally, people like me who drank regularly every single night, I certainly thought I didn't have a problem because I was so on top of everything. Like I was so on top of
Mm-hmm.
everything in my life. I was like, oh, well, I'm never the one falling over drunk. I'm never the one slurring my words in public. So I
Yep.
don't have a problem.
Yep.
So like alcohol deceives both types into thinking that the alcohol is completely, safe and innocuous. So that's really interesting. Question for you. So when your dad died and you were drinking every day, and it might be hard to remember, but back to that point in your life, do you feel like the alcohol was helping? I mean, was it turning off the grief?
No, it would feel better temporarily, but then I was so teary all the time. So here I was under the influence of alcohol and crying and feeling so incapable of just, I had three kids at home and I was trying to, deal with my family and my husband. And no, it just made it worse. It exacerbated the guilt, the grief by adding guilt to it
Yeah,
and feeling unable to cope otherwise. Like if I wasn't doing that, what was I going to do?
right, right. And then so we fast forward a little bit and you start to say, okay, I'm sick of feeling guilty. I feel like I'm not being kind of my best self. So what initial actions did you take? Where did you start to sniff around for getting yourself getting yourself out of it?
Well, I did read Alan Carr's book.
Oh, love Alan Carr.
Yeah, but I actually did it for I had a new partner at that time, and I did it because I considered that my partner had a serious drinking problem, which was actually true. But I didn't really do it for myself. And I never really lost the temptation. Like I resisted the temptation for over a year.
Wow.
But then that relationship ended and I started again because, obviously I didn't have a problem. And it escalated from there. And even when I first heard about your book, and I'm not even sure how it happened, it was just something online that I saw. And I listened to your whole thing about your video course and thought, well, this would be really good for some people. It's a good thing I'm okay. And then I had an experience the very last night that I drank. I was out with friends and I disclosed something to these two people and came home and felt so guilty about it that I had done this, and I would never have done that if I hadn't been drinking. And I decided to have a glass of vodka just to drown those feelings, and it tasted so horrible that I poured it down the sink, and that was the last drink that I ever had.
Wow.
And I didn't even know at the time. It was not like, okay, I'm quitting. It was just, ugh, this is so foul. And the next day I thought, wow, I need to read that book I just heard about. And so I did, and I've listened to it like 3 times, and it just so reinforced for me. Well, like there was an epiphany, and then I just kept reinforcing it because I felt that it was so important to keep undoing that conditioning and to not let the alcohol thoughts creep in again and hijack my brain and make me decide that it would be a good idea to just have one here and there, because I don't want to now.
And I think that's the thing, is that we live in this culture that, really makes it such a good idea. And we're bombarded with stuff. And, I talk about this a lot, but I come from a background of advertising and marketing. And so, I'm very familiar with the fact that advertising agencies have psychologists on staff who are looking at, pulling how to influence human behavior. I mean, it's a very methodical, scientific thing.
Yeah.
And as humans, we don't want to imagine that we are ever sold to or influenced. That is just our natural, of course not. We're independent thinkers. The studies show that we're absolutely not independent thinkers. We're much more akin to sheep than we'd ever like to admit. But the interesting thing is that in the midst of believing we're not being influenced, we truly are, and if you just look at the statistics of how much money is spent in the United States on alcohol advertising, it is more than any other thing, period. Second is cars. And they wouldn't do that if it didn't work, and they can't actually do it in the UK anymore. It's been banned, alcohol advertising in the UK, because it became such a national health crisis that they've actually banned it. But I think you're right. Like, just constantly being on your guard and against the unconscious conditioning. And another thing I love about your story is that, I am of such, I feel like and I say this all the time, I feel like I got off the train before it even went into the tunnel, much less before it went off the rails, right? And I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful that, but our society, it does this. It says, if somebody wants to start questioning their drinking because of this whole story we've built up around the fact that certain people are alcoholics and other people aren't, we've said, it's like this. You're starting to feel like your wrist is a bit sore. You're not really liking your drinking so much. So you go to Google or to the doctor or whoever, and the doctor says, okay, well, we need to amputate your arm. You need to never ever drink again. And then you say, oh, no deal. And so you go back into your life, and then all of a sudden your elbow's starting to hurt. And then you go back to the doctor. Oh, well, we need to amputate your arm. It's this black and white thing. Oh, no. And then eventually your arm is kind of totally black and hanging. and then you say, okay, I'm ready to amputate my arm. Like, why do we have to go there? Like, why can't we just have a conversation about your wrist being sore, and not make it so scary? So what I love about your story is that I feel like you truly were, not, there isn't some huge rock bottom. There isn't some big
No.
moment it's a very thoughtful and empowered choice that you made, when you had a sore wrist, which just gives me chills, to be honest.
Mm, yeah. And I always thought you'd have to have a real rock bottom to be able to stop. And it's just not always the case.
Where do you think that idea comes from?
Well, from the brainwashing, from the conditioning, and that creates such a stigma about a problem with alcohol, like it's a moral failing, that, I certainly wouldn't ever have wanted to admit to it. But just to acknowledge that, hey, my aunt became addicted to morphine in the hospital. It's not a moral failing. It's just what happens. So if we drink alcohol, we're all at risk of developing, a serious addiction.
Yeah, alcohol is addictive. I mean, it's certainly different. Alcohol is something that we take orally and then it gets absorbed in a much different way into our bloodstream than something that we inject, like morphine in the hospital. So
Yeah.
there's a longer process, and it's a process that, because we have this kind of cultural norm of only drinking in the evenings and, different things, it's not like being injected with morphine, certainly, in the sense that how quickly it can happen is very, very different. Equally, when you go and you drink for 2 weeks straight because of a tragedy and you're drinking every single day, or when you start, addiction, alcohol is addictive. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about alcohol. There's a lot of different studies. There's studies that say it's good for you in moderation. There's studies that
Hmm.
say this, but the one thing that is agreed upon is that it is addictive. It triggers all
Hmm.
the same addictive mechanisms within our body that heroin does, that cocaine does, that morphine does,
Hmm.
and in fact, it's far more deadly, in our society than any of those drugs by many multiples, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, what does, one of the hardest things, there's two questions I just love asking everybody who comes on the show. And that's, what is one of the hardest things is just acclimating into your normal life in terms of telling your friends and talking to people, and how do you deal with when somebody offers you a drink? So I'd love to hear how you navigate this.
Well, I found, and I have a pretty active social life, but I found that, especially in a larger gathering, nobody notices anyway. So I'm not explaining it to anyone. One of my very best friends, who I get together with every couple of months, she doesn't live in the same city, and we have always shared a bottle of wine our first night together. It's just been such a ritual. And so the idea of not doing that, I was feeling a little bit of anxiety, even though she's such a good friend, but was feeling a little anxious about talking to her about it. And the first thing she said when I did talk to her was, well, I guess we won't be having that bottle of wine together anymore. And but in the end, she was very, very supportive. And I know that she'll be looking at her own drinking, and is definitely looking at her own drinking now. So for me, the danger is to get preachy or self-righteous about it. And I know that I really have to guard against that, because I can be like an evangelist about
Mm.
stuff that I really believe in. And so this is a really great opportunity for me to curb that impulse and to just keep reminding myself that I was there, and I was convinced that cutting back could be done. I was convinced that, I was so good to myself in other ways that alcohol was not a problem for me. And just to keep remembering that, and to keep my humility about it, and to just talk about my own experience, not about anybody else. Not anybody else at all, but like, it was not working for me, and it was a really good decision to stop. And I'm so happy with my decision, and to just leave it at that. And if people want to ask more about it, because some people have, they really want to know. And those are the people who are generally really supportive and that really get it. But the people who want to pressure me to have a drink, I'm not interested in discussing it with them, because they're not at a place where they really want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah, and I think
And
it. Go
that
ahead.
really hasn't happened. So I've been lucky that way.
I think that's so true. I mean, I feel like people have different motivations, and some people's motivations in asking you about it are quite sincere. Some
Yeah,
people's motivations are actually just to prove to themselves that you had a problem so that they can
exactly.
justify their own drinking. And,
Yep.
I'm certainly not into being shamed about this. So
Yeah.
those conversations are one that I don't really want to have. I had an interesting, similar experience. I had a good friend who we'd been friends since kindergarten. So, I mean, really good long term friend. And all of a sudden, she stopped coming around. And like 2 years, she used to just like, her and her family would come and stay with us. And granted, she'd always stay with us, and we'd always get, quite drunk and play poker.
Mm,
And she just stopped, she just found other places to stay. And so I didn't think too much of it. I was like, okay, like, I get it. You want to stay with other people or whatever. And then, let's see, about 2 years later, she finally had a conversation with me, and she said, I've just been so afraid that without the margaritas, we wouldn't have had the same level of fun at your house, and same
mm,
level of relationship. And
mm,
I was like, oh my gosh, like, I've known you since we were 4 years old. Like,
mm,
we had slumber parties and laughed until 2 in the morning. Like,
mm,
our friendship is not based on margaritas, and I realize it's, in some cases, that's certainly true. Friendships are based on margaritas, but
mm,
the fear around thinking, and I think it's true for so many things, we believe that these certain things are based on alcohol, when the truth is, like, we've rekindled a brilliant friendship, and it's better, now, almost 4 years later, because she and I have been transparent about this issue. And yeah, the last time she was down, she spent the night with her kids, and man, we just hammed it up all night long. It was one of the most enjoyable times. We were cracking up, and also getting into really deep conversations about, different things in our culture, which we might not have done as much when we were drinking, because it was just more about like the drinking games. But that's really cool.
yeah.
So the last question I have for you is, and I try to ask this of everybody, but now on this side, we all have so much apprehension about even trialing an alcohol-free period, because of all these reasons we were just discussing. So, on this side of the fence, what would you tell Maureen, from drinking Maureen, about the fears that she had, and what life is like?
Well, the number one thing I would say is that cutting down and trying to moderate is so much more difficult than just quitting. Like once the decision was made, there was just no more of that back and forth and should I have another one and I should stop now and it won't hurt. I'll just have one more and or I won't drink today at all. It like all of those conversations that were so exhausting. And there's so much freedom in just saying, I'm done. That's it. And it's not even like I wouldn't have needed to say to myself, you can never have another drink. But actually, that you won't want to have another one. It's just not. And already I feel like there's no temptation. I can't imagine there will be again. I mean, I suppose it's possible. I'll just get the book out and read it again to
Awesome.
reinforce for myself. No, wait a minute. That's just a temporary thought, and it will leave.
Yeah, and I
It
think
will
that
leave,
that's
and then the next morning you'll wake up and say, I'm so glad I didn't drink. Because I think that every day it's the first thought when I wake up in the morning. I feel so good and I am so happy I did this.
right. That's so awesome. And I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think that if we approach this, the barrier to this amazing, amazing life, for me, for so many other, was this idea of never again. Because that
Yeah.
seems so terrifying, and it seems so big and so huge, and it seemed just so not what we needed. And and then the joy of finding out like, wow, at the end of the day, it isn't about telling myself I can never do this again. It's about coming to a place of knowledge and awareness to where I just want something more with all of
Yeah.
me. There isn't any of me that feels deprived or like I'm missing out. It's just that all
Yeah.
of me wants something more. And even now, if I was to say, okay, like I'm pretty careful to say like, I don't drink and I'm happy about that. I'm thrilled about that. But also just even to my subconscious, I'm not going to sit here and say I can never have another drink because I
No.
feel like my personality type, and by the way, the human genome almost is programmed to say, rebel, rebel, rebel,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know? But every day I'm like, wow, I don't want a drink. And to be honest, I don't, even think about it every day anymore. I just like, it's just this very natural thing to be like, why in the world would I ever
Yeah.
put that into my body? No, nothing could make me do that. But it is such a choice and an empowering choice instead of a have to. And I think just even changing that language to I never have to drink again instead of I never get to drink again is just
Yeah.
really a cool thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
the money that you save as an extra bonus. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so great. I can go out to the bar with my friends and have a great night and see a show, and I spent $10
Yeah. Yeah. It's so awesome.
instead of 50 or 60. It feels so good to do that.
Oh, it's amazing. My husband and I got back from a vacation. We took our kids to the beach, and we were just, it was already expensive, right? And then we're just realizing we're like, oh my gosh, like every time we go and we just say hundreds and hundreds of dollars
Yeah.
we've saved on this vacation, and then we use it to do fun other stuff, like,
Yeah.
okay, now
Reward
we're going to
yourself.
indulge ourselves with the massage or with the dolphin tour, whatever the case
Hmm.
is, right? And
And
it's just so
another
cool.
interesting thing I wanted to mention, because I know that some people get sugar cravings when they
Mm,
quit drinking.
hmm.
And I found the opposite, that once I removed that source of sugar from my diet, my other sugar cravings died with it. So I don't have any desire to eat sugar. And I know that's not true for everybody, but that was certainly a big bonus for me because I certainly had a sweet tooth and I just don't now.
I think that was it took a long time for me, and I think people get, and I don't know enough about this to like be kind of giving a official perspective, but in my just gut feeling, there's so much sugar in any type of alcohol, so many simple carbohydrates and
Yeah.
simple sugars that when you stop it abruptly, you create this deficit. And sugar, just like anything else, your body's been compensating for it. So when you have this deficit, it throws it kind of off kilter. So I think, yeah, very early days, having sugar cravings is completely normal. But equally, once your sugar cravings come from eating sugar or drinking sugar. So once you're not drinking a huge source of sugar, your whole body balances out and maintains homeostasis. So at first, I just gave in to all my sugar cravings because I figured, hey, I'm doing such a monumental thing with the
Yeah.
drinking that I'm going to be really gentle with myself in every other regard. But very similar, where I used to want to go out and drink a Shirley Temple in place of my drink, which is huge sugar drink. Now I
Yeah.
just want nice tea or a soda, with lime, So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
I'm the
no
same.
no sugar cravings anymore, which is, yeah, but it took kind of getting over the hump. But yeah, that's a great point. What a nice added benefit.
Yes, absolutely. And to just drop a few pounds without even thinking about it.
Yeah, so
So
cool.
I just feel so I've been so health conscious for so many years and have a great diet and do all the right things and work out and et cetera, et cetera. But except for this little thing called a drinking issue. And now I feel like, wow, my integrity is now intact in this area. I can say there is no except for. It's like everything I do is benefiting my health physically and mentally. So that's such a hit. That's so empowering
That's a
to have.
really good point. I mean, I think of um, how many people can say that, right? Like for so many years, we have these things that we have this idea of ourselves, how we kind of want to be, right? We all have this idea of, I want to be this person that truly takes care of their body, and that, whatever your things are that you want to have in your life. But then we all have these things that we're like, but I'm not giving this one up. I'm not giving this thing up.
Yes.
So I'm going to be this person in all these other areas, but I'm not going to give this one up. And
I'll compensate for that.
Right. And drinking was but I'm always going to be a drinker. I'm not going to give that one up. That's not going to be it. And then how, on the other side, not only have I done that, but all these other things that I used to do that I wasn't quite happy about have also just kind of disappeared in a way. And so how many people can truly say, like, wow, I live in an area of integrity where there's really not a lot that I'm doing that I'm kind of like, well, that's just the one thing that I'm just going to not give up.
Yeah, and not spending that mental energy worrying about it and justifying it and compensating for it. I mean, that was, it had to be exhausting me, because I have so much more energy now that I don't have to think about that.
Yeah, so much more mental space. It's amazing. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a joy. Anything else, Maureen, you'd like to say to the audience?
Well, just that the getting support is so important, and I'm on the the app, the Naked Mind app, and I check in with that, not as frequently as I did right in the beginning, but I'm still quite active on there. And it's great to be able to say encouraging words to other people who are considering this path, or who have just started. And to just reinforce that, yes, there is a growing community of people who are waking up to the truth about alcohol. And it's so exciting that this is going to go the way that smoking did. I really believe that. And I'm starting to see it more. Like when I tell certain friends that I've quit drinking, and they say, well, I've been thinking about that too. Or I have other friends who've been saying the same thing. And to really get that, I think most people who drink are worried about it to some extent, even if they don't acknowledge it. Even if they're very moderate, there's no safe level, and that's what the science is showing, that it raises our cancer risk even if you're really moderate. So why would we do that?
Right.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the benefits you think you're getting are really just, they're really illusory. Yeah. Totally. That's amazing. It's so cool. I agree with you. I think it's changing.
Yeah, it's a huge consciousness raising that's happening on the planet right now in this area, and I'm very excited about it.
Oh, that's so cool. Me too. Thrilled. It's just awesome. It's awesome. And I was reading something on Facebook. It was just one guy's opinion, and he had commented on something I had posted, but he was basically saying that he had done some look at it historically, and so many cultures have had a downfall in alcohol. And he cited like the Roman Empire and, to some extent, or just different cultures that have had a downfall through drinking. And and it's really encouraging to see that, like, I know especially in the UK, like that culture is actually really becoming massively conscious about alcohol, and interestingly, the younger generation as well is very conscious.
Eastern Europe, which has some of the highest alcohol consumption in the world, and look at what's happening there.
That's interesting.
So, who would have related those things? But there's a big connection, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, well, this has been great, Maureen. Thank you so much for taking the time. And
you're so welcome,
really
and thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
This has been Annie Grace with This Naked Mind podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more at thisnakedmind.com. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, as it really helps us spread the word.